Internal Revenue Service IRS Tax News. Choosing a trustworthy payroll service provider can protect employers from fraud. IRS Tax Tip 2020-112, September 1st, 2020. When hiring a company to handle payroll and payroll tax, employers should carefully choose their payroll service provider. This can help a business avoid missed deposits for employment taxes and other unpaid bills. Most of these businesses provide quality service, but there are some who don't have their clients' best interest in mind. Each year, there are a few payroll service providers who don't submit their clients' payroll taxes and close down abruptly. The damage hits their unsuspecting clients hard. So note, when you're thinking about a payroll provider, they're going to be helping you to pull the money out of the employee checks and then pay them to the IRS and possibly help with the payment of the employer portion to the IRS as well. So when we think about payroll taxes, we know that there's an employee portion and an employer portion. So if they take money out of the employee's checks by withholding it and don't pay it to the IRS, that's actually kind of a double type of problem, because then if you look at that, it's not just the company didn't pay their taxes from an IRS perspective, or if you look at it from this perspective, it would be that you basically took money from the employee, right? Because they earned it, and then you took money from the employee and then didn't pay it to the IRS. So now you have a non-payment of the taxes, and on top of that, basically pretty much kind of like theft from the employees by basically taking their wages and keeping them, as opposed to paying them for the payroll taxes. So that's kind of a mess that, of course, you don't want to get involved in. Also note that the payroll companies, if you're working with a payroll company that hasn't been around a long time, that might be a reputable company, but it could be a little bit more risky, because the definition of a business versus basically a fraud or a scam, to me, or one kind of thing you can think about with relation to whether something is a business or a scam, is whether or not they have long-term intention. So obviously, if something is going to make money in the short run and then they close down and leave, for example, if a payroll company was to open up in the short run, pick up some clients, and then collect withholdings and then shut down and leave, well, that's not a business. That's obviously a scam or fraud. And so when you're thinking about payroll companies, you might want to be looking at one of the things you might look at least, is the longevity of the payroll company and just judging their long-term, interests in the area. Just note there's a lot of like larger payroll companies that are out there that have competitive payroll companies. There's smaller ones as well that may be perfectly fine for certain areas. But you want to be careful with the payroll companies, because you don't want to get in the mess of not paying the payroll taxes, because it can be a mess. And like I said, it could be worse than simply not paying taxes. It could be seen as basically obviously taking money from the employees. So typically these clients remain legally responsible for paying the taxes due, even if the employer sent funds to the payroll service provider for required deposits or payments. So note that the IRS is going to go back to the employer, even though you hired a payroll company as the agent. The payroll company is basically acting as a third party, as an agent, and they should be, doing the work there. But if the payroll company disappears, then obviously the IRS is going to be coming back to the employer to look for the taxes on it. And the employer's not really going to be able to say, hey, the payroll company is supposed to handle that. Look at this, I sent them the checks right here, but the payroll company has now disappeared, right? And they're not there. So the IRS is going to look for recourse on the employer, who's obviously the one who's ultimately involved with regards to the decision-making process for payroll, as well as the payroll companies that they're doing business with. So employers should understand their payroll and employment tax responsibilities. Choose a trusted payroll service to handle the important job. Here are two options. A certified professional employer organization, typically CPEOs. The CPEO are solely liable for paying the customer's employment tax, filing returns, and making deposits and payments for the taxes reported related to wages and other compensation. Reporting agent. This is a payroll service provider that informs the IRS of its relationship with a client using Form 8655 Reporting Agent Authorization, which is signed by the client. Reporting agents must deposit a client's tax using the electronic federal tax payment system, and can exchange information with the IRS on behalf of the client, such as to resolve an issue. They are also required to provide clients a written statement reminding the employer that not the reporting agent, is ultimately responsible for timely filing returns and payment of taxes. So you might look into these two options if you're considering the payroll, and or discuss these items with your current payroll provider to see if they fall into any of whether one of these categories. IRS encourages employers to enroll in EFTPS and make sure its payroll service provider uses EFTPS to make tax deposits. So that's going to be a payment method that they recommend to be having. It's free and it gives employers safe and easy online access to their payment history when deposits are made under the employer identification number. So it's going to give you a nice audit trail of the payments, which you really want with payroll, because payroll is another one of those areas that if there's a problem, if an employee leaves and they come back later and have questions about something, you want to make sure you have the records for a longer period of time than normal for other records, and you can get into them as easily as possible. The paper trail is something you really want with payroll. So the employer identification number, enabling them to monitor whether the payroll service provider is meeting its tax deposit responsibilities. Employers should contact the IRS about any bills or notices received, especially payments managed by the third party. Call the number on the bill, write to the IRS office that sent the bill, contact the IRS Business Tax Hotline at 800-829-4933, or visit the local IRS office. Note that you also might want to have your correspondence with the IRS going to you, the owner, rather than possibly the payroll company, so that you can act as the interim in between, so that you can take a look at any kind of problems and then forward that kind of information, of course, to the payroll company so that they can resolve it. And that's kind of another check that you might have, so that if there's any notices from the IRS, if there's any problems on their side, that you actually get the letter and it doesn't go directly bypass you, so you can have another check in the process. So there'll be more links for more information about this down below. There'll be a link to this in the description.